Hello and welcome to the lecture on control structures. So we're going to look into if and else statements. Okay, so open up the example. If you go to material folder, control structures, go to example 1, if else statement. Open up the logical flow and deliverables file. So let's look at what you will learn in this lecture. First we'll look at the syntax of if and else condition, how to write an if and else condition. Then we'll, using those if and else, we'll check if the user given the input is correct or not. Then using the if condition statements, we'll write without the braces, curly braces, and see how it behaves. Then we'll check if student is pass or failed. So we'll do all these 4 examples, and for that we'll create the 4 files for it. Okay, so let's create a folder. So I'm in the amps ww folder. Let's create a folder here, control. Okay, we'll place all our files here. So let's go ahead and create one file first. Copying the file name, go to Sublime, Control N, Control S, find our folder control. Okay, so we'll create the file here. So let me paste the logical sequence we're going to do our program here. First we will check the syntax, then we'll check user inputs, then we'll write the if condition without braces, and then we'll check if student is pass or fail. Okay, so I'll create the sample 1 first. That's the 1 file. Then we'll create the sequence files like 2, 3 and 4. Okay, so the first one is basically to understand how to write an if else statements. Okay, I want you to follow the coding standards and follow how the coding style has been used here. Okay, you need to follow that. Let's define some variables, boolean variable. Okay, now I'll define a if statement. If you look at the coding style here, this is how you basically write an if condition. If, then you open a close a parenthesis here, then you open the curly braces, then you close the curly braces, and if you have an else, then you can write an else statement, then you can write the close the open and the curly braces. You no need to have the space, is okay to have a space, but just to look it nicer. Okay, I'm just adding some space here. Okay, this is how you should write your coding style as well. This is how the if condition should be written, with if keyword and also open and close parenthesis, some space here. Okay, then some space here just to look it nicer. Okay, now let's put our condition here. Let's say some boolean condition here. You have to put a true or a false condition here. You can use operators. We're going to look into all those things. Okay, and then we'll echo out. This is a if block condition. And this is a true condition, right? So whenever the condition is true, this if block is executed, and whenever the condition is false, the else block is executed. So I'm going to copy paste here, and I'm going to say this is an else block, and this is a false condition. Okay, so you have true condition and false condition. Because this variable is a false, the else condition will be executed. So let's go to control folder, and we're gonna run this file. Okay, and you'll be able to see the else part printed. Okay, because if check for true and false, if it is true, this block of code is executed. If it is false, the else block is executed. Because the some boolean condition is false, that's why the else block is executed. If the same thing is true, then you can see the true condition is executed. The if block is executed and true condition is executed. Okay, so remember the if always checks for true and false. If it is true, the if will be executed. If it is false, else block will be executed. So we'll define one more variable. I'll say one more boolean condition, which is false. Let's make it to false again. And now we will check 2 conditions. Okay, we'll check this condition and even this condition. Now let's copy paste this one. Okay, can you guess the output here? I want you to make a guess here. What happens if it's false and false? What will be printed here? Okay, the else block will be printed here. What happens if it is true and false? If it is true and false, then it is false. True and true. Okay, then we'll execute this and it's a true block condition. Okay, so that's how you basically write an if condition. You have an if block, then you have an else block. If is always true, else is always false. Next, I want to show you an example how you're going to write an if condition inside an HTML page. Okay, how the HTML output can also be managed with the if conditions. For this, I'm going to paste an HTML code here. Okay, there's nothing inside it. Let's write inside the body. Okay, so I'm going to write an PHP code and I'm going to say if sub boolean condition, or you can say true, right? Then this will always be true. I'm enclosing this. Okay, so this is an if statement here inside the HTML. Okay, and whatever is inside, written inside this, will be under the if condition. Okay, so I'm gonna say h1, this is a true condition. Okay, now we're gonna close the if condition and then I'm gonna write the else. So we can say PHP okay, so I'm writing the PHP again, starting and opening the PHP by closing the if tag and also opening up the else tag now. Okay, and whatever you write here inside this, whatever you write here will be printed once the condition is false. Okay, then we're going to close the else. And if you look at this example, it's very important to understand how PHP generally behaves inside the HTML. Okay, you have open and closed the PHP if conditions, then you are trying to print something, then you have open and close the else part. Okay, let's quickly look into this file first. Okay, so now we have HTML, so we have to close the PHP. Okay, so I've closed the PHP, opening and closing the PHP, then we have the HTML here. Okay, so let's open the browser, localhost control, and put the file name here. So this is a true condition, so let's change this to false, and I'm gonna delete this up, then it will be a false condition. So this is a false condition. And if you look at the conditions, right, the conditions are, the HTML output is managed by the if conditions. So what you want to print on the browser, you can even control that with the if condition. This is a very important logic to understand, because this is how you play around with what text you need to send to the user. And how you're going to check that is basically using the if condition. So you can mix and match PHP and HTML together, and you can hide some part of the code using the conditions as well. So if the user is logged in, you want to show some part of HTML. If the user is not logged in, then you want to see some part of the HTML, and this can be done with this kind of syntax. Okay, you can still use the PHP method and write the if conditions and put all the HTML code here, and the PHP, once this execute this file, will manage and decide which conditions of if is true, and that part of HTML will be given back to the browser. Okay, that's why we are able to see different conditions and different outputs based on the if conditions here. If I make this back to true, then this is a true condition. Okay, so I hope this is very simple and easy to understand. Let's do the sample 2 now. So I'm going to create one more file, copy over the same code. So we'll check if the input given by the user is correct or not. So we're gonna do one more example here. So we'll call it sample2, and this is the condition we're gonna check. Okay, and imagine this is an input from the user, right? Some input 1, and we'll say some text from the user, and we're gonna have input 2, which is 34. So let's write one condition here, condition 1, and I'm gonna say is null, and I'm gonna say not, then I can say that this variable is not null. Okay, so $input 1 is not null, is not empty. I'm going to do an else here. I'm going to say is empty. Okay, so let's run this. Okay, so $input 1 is not empty, and if you comment this out, if you say null, then it is empty. Okay, so that's how basically you check the condition. You can do one more condition, condition 2. I'm gonna copy paste this. Okay, we can even check if the variable is set or not. We can say is set, and we can add up multiple conditions using and or operator. Okay, you can say is set $input 1. So let's run this condition now. Because we haven't defined our variables, we have commented out our variables. So is null, is set is basically false. Let's run this now. So if I press again, refresh the page, then input 1 is empty. Okay, now we are checking is set and is null, and the more important thing that you understand is we are grouping the two conditions with an AND operator. Let's do a third condition. You can even check not equal to null. Then you can do the if and else here. So there are 3 different types. One is you use a method, then you use an operator here, then you can use a not operator here, right? And then you check some conditions here. Okay, $1 is empty. Let's do one more example. So now we have seen 3 different ways of checking nulls. I'll give you a best way to check if the field is empty or not. Okay, so you can say empty, that's a method. And you can check whether the input variable is empty or not. Okay, it is empty, and if you remove this out, and $value is not empty, this shows empty. So I believe it's coming up from here, right? Okay, so let's look at another condition. So this time we have an integer, we have checked with strings. So here is an integer, so we'll use input 2 here, and we'll check an integer condition. So we can say $input 2 is greater than or equal to 34. Then we can say input 2 is greater than 34. Is less than 34. Okay, So we have different type of condition. Let's print this. It's 34. Okay, is equal and greater than 34. So what we have seen in if conditions is you can use a method, you can use an operator, AND operator, you can use the operator of NOT to check. Then again you can use some methods here, and if it's an integer you can even use the operators for checking those conditions. Okay, this condition of checking if and else is very simple. You write with if, open parenthesis, close parenthesis, then you have flower brackets to open and close, then you have else, then open and close. Okay, let's move on to the third example. I'm gonna copy paste everything from here into this. So we're gonna do a sample 3 here, and the condition is if condition without braces. We'll see how the if behaves if there are no curly braces. So we'll say some boolean condition is equal to false, and we're going to write the same if condition that we have written above. We're going to use this. Okay, I'm going to say we're going to remove this, remove this. Okay, so we want to remove the flower brackets, right? That's what we want to check now, and you want to see what will happen if I remove the flower brackets. Okay, let's run the example 3. Go to third example, and this is a false condition, so it's able to know this is a false condition without the brackets as well, right? If I make it true, then this is a true condition, right? So it's able to understand even if you don't put the brackets here. Okay, let's see what happens if you do like this. Okay, let me call it false, I'll call it true. Okay, this is a valid question for interview or any test, just to understand how this will behave. Well, this will error out because there's no flower brackets, and the way the flower bracket works is only for one line. Okay, it only checks for one line. If you have one line, then you don't have to put the curly braces, and if you have more than one line, then it will error out. Okay, so I'm going to comment this out. So let's do a one-liner and understand how the one-liner will works. Okay, use the same condition here. Okay, what I mean by one-liner is I just put everything in one line. Okay, it's actually everything is in one line. Okay, and let's see if program can understand. And there is no problem in understanding in one line as well. You can write all the condition in one line. Remember the rule here, if you have one more echo it will fail, like what the case we have seen here. If you are having a curly braces, only one line is allowed, multiple lines are not allowed. Even you can put these lines on not onto the new line but also to the sides, okay, to here, and then it doesn't really care for the new lines and everything. So we'll see a recommended practice. The recommended practice is if you have one line conditions like this, always use braces. Okay, that's the recommendation that you have to follow for if conditions. Okay, never leave anything without braces because it's confusing to read, and let's say if there's some programmer who's trying to add some conditions, then the program will fail. Okay, so make sure always have a practice of writing braces and make it as an habit for your coding style. Okay, let's move on to the last example. Copy paste this. So let's look at the fourth example. So the fourth sample is basically check if the condition is passed or failed. So we will say result is equal to passed. Okay, and we'll check a condition here. If result is equal to passed, else the result is failed. So we'll say echo student has passed the exam. The student has not passed the exam. So let's check the result. So let's run the fourth file. Okay, so the student has passed the exam. So that's what we have seen. The student has passed the exam, and if you make it like something else, then the student has not passed the exam. So I hope it is very clear how to use the if conditions. We have seen 4 samples. Fourth one was check if student is pass or fail. So we use the equal operator, and we have used the variable to check with against the string. Then we have some recommended practice. We saw how the one liner and with and without curly braces. Then we have checked how to check the numbers and also check empty values. Then we have seen how to use the if conditions and control the output that would be printed on the HTML page. Okay, and then we have understood how to write an if and else conditions. Well, that's all about if and else statement, and I'll see you in the next one.